Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz here, host of the Raiders Report. And coming up on today's show, we're going to be looking at some surprise cut candidates that the Las Vegas Raiders could have after the 2024 NFL Draft. Let's face it, if we're going to sit up here and say that Antonio Pierce and Tom Telesco crushed it, that also means that some people might be out of a job. But I do want to say this again. It is surprise cut candidates. Very, very important statement right there. If the Raiders end up moving from any of these players out there, we will break it all down. But also, to make sure that you're not on the hot seat, I want you to hit that subscribe button. I want you to turn on those notifications because I know the people that are subbed and I know the people that aren't subbed. And I know that about 40% of the people that watch the show are not subscribed to the Raiders Report. So if you could do me a solid, hit that subscribe button so you are not on the hot seat. So the cut candidates that you're about to see coming up here on the show, I have ranked them from least surprising to the most surprising. Now, the way that I also thought of this show is based on not like the Raiders cutting them right now, but also if the Raiders, when cut down day does happen, which is all the way in August, if some of these dudes end up getting cut, are we going to be surprised? That's kind of how I thought about it. So coming in here at number 5, the least surprising of the bunch, I'm going to go with Brandon Facyson, cornerback. And the reason why that I went with this is because the Silver and Black, they drafted 2 corners, okay? And the fact that they drafted a corner in Devonshire in round 7, also Richardson in round 4, tells me that they did want to add a little bit of depth there. And if you cut Facyson, which is the biggest reason why he ends up making the show, is because if you cut him, you save $2.6 million and you're only going to eat $350K. Let's face it here. He's got zero money guaranteed left on his contract. He's going to be a free agent next offseason. If you're the Raiders and you want to focus a little bit more on some of this youth talent instead of a guy that was injured for basically the entire season last season, why not do it? I also think that the Raiders are trying to find this longer, lanky corner, something that they have in a Nate Hobbs, Jack Jones. That's what Jakorian Bennett's built like. Richardson, Devonshire, also kind of built like that as well. So if you can move on from a Facyson and then give another opportunity to one of these younger players, that's kind of what this MO is, because he was a slow corner before the Raiders signed him. And again, this is a McDaniels and Ziegler signing. After the injury, I get it. He's a little bit of a big-bodied player, but to me, he's more of a zone corner than he is a man corner. So I don't really think that he's all that great of a fit. But I did want to play a game because recently on this show, I broke down my 53-man roster projections for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I got to a point where I was like, I had to pick between Sam Webb, Brandon Facyson, Jakorian Bennett. If you could only keep one player from this list right here, because this might actually happen, especially if the Raiders add a Stephon Gilmore, Xavier Howard, another starting caliber safety. This organization's probably going to have to keep just one. So if you could keep just one, you're going to go with Jakorian Bennett, Brandon Facyson, Sam Webb. Let me know down below. And judging by most of the votes that are coming in on our live show, from James Johnson, Yoda Jenkins, Tadashi, Vincenzo, Blizzy, Celtic, Raider, everybody is saying Jakorian. I know Bennett really struggled last season. But then also, you can see that he has athletic ability. His technique just needs a lot of work. And I'm hoping in year 2 with Patrick Graham, you saw a guy like Trevon Merrick struggle a little bit in year 1, had a much better year 2. Sometimes that second year is very, very critical for a player who needs a lot of coaching. And let's face it, Jakorian Bennett did not have a lot of coaching last season, only when AP took over. Let's go to number 4 here. It's Byron Young at defensive tackle. And I know that the Raiders did not draft any defensive tackles. I understand that. But, to me, the number one player that I am the most confident from last year's class that's not going to be a part of this team, it's Byron Young, for the simple fact of they signed a bunch of defensive tackles and they spent a lot of money on that interior defense already. I also know that the way that they look at Tyree Wilson, they want him to play on the interior. If you cut him, you save $446. You eat you eat $842. I just know that, to me, when you look from top to bottom, the amount of defensive tackles that are on this team, it's a hard pill for me to swallow, figuring out a way that he ends up making this team. Because right now, he's the 6th best defensive tackle, and maybe if you consider Tyree Wilson a defensive tackle, he might even be number 7 on that list. The Raiders, they decided to bring back Nesta Jade Silvera. The Raiders, they decided to bring back Marquand McCall, right? Like, these were two players that got signed to future contracts very, very quickly. Then you had a guy like Shannon. You had a guy like Fox as a UDFA. What if one of those guys pop up out of nowhere? Like, if I'm the Raiders, I look at Byron Young and I go, I didn't draft him. He did not impress me last season. Why do I have to end up keeping him on this team? So one of the reasons why I'm bringing him up now is because if you're an NFL team out there and you missed on defensive tackle in the draft and you want to take a 7th-round flyer on a guy, I'm telling you right now, if a team offered the Raiders a 7th-round pick in the 2025 drafts, hell, I think if you offer the Raiders a 7th-round pick in the 2026 draft, they would take that right now for Byron Young, which is why he ends up making this list here. Before I get into the top 3 surprise cut candidates, Mother's Day, man, it's right around the corner. And to make sure that you don't get cut and that you're not on the hot seat, get your special lady in your life something nice at chatsports.com/RaiderMom. That link's going to be available to y'all down in the comments, down in the description. We got mom jerseys. We got T-shirts. We have, what are they called? Wine, a little wine cooler holder. We got a coffee holder. Like, my mom, she does not watch a lot of sports. Hell, I have a picture of Charles Haley. Me and Charles Haley are standing next to each other, and I go, Mom, look, I met Tom Brady. She goes, tell him I said hi. My mom knows nothing about football, but she supports me, and recently I've got her some Raider stuff. She wears it, especially on game days. So if you got that special woman in your life, chatsports.com/RaiderMom. And Chugs told me this. Only the real ones, okay, only the daring will go to chatsports.com/RaiderMilf. That link is available to y'all down in the comments and down in the description. If mom's not enough and you want something special for that Raider MILF in your life, chatsports.com/RaiderMilf. I will warn you, though. I will warn you. Only the dare need to click on that link. Let's go to number 3, and this one is going to blow the doors off of a lot of people that are watching this show. Michael Gallup at wide receiver. And I got to give a little credit to somebody who was watching our show live on Monday when we were breaking all this down, and I kind of sat up there. He sent in a super chat, and I go, he's 100% right. I don't think that Michael Gallup is a lock to make this roster because of his health. One of the people that cover the Dallas Cowboys that I'm very close to texted me and said, Gallup is playing on one leg, and if he's predominantly a field stretcher and he doesn't have that ability to stretch the field anymore, then he might not make this roster. I also think that the fact that his deal is worth up to $3 million in the world of wide receivers right now, that tells me that not many teams, maybe nobody, were interested. It also tells me that the Raiders, who were working out some other wide receivers, thought that this was a good deal. Now, like, I do think Gallup is going to make this roster. I do. But again, if this show is surprise cut candidates, and if we're talking about this right after the NFL draft, a very surprising player, if they didn't end up making the roster, would be Michael Gallup, considering the fact that he was just signed and considering the fact that we don't have a lot of depth here. But the players, to me, that could really impact Gallup's ability to make this roster, I do think if they want a little bit more special teams in a DJ Turner. What if they want something in a Griffin, who they gave some money as a UDFA to? I don't really think Keaton's all that great, because I've had a lot of people from Tennessee say, dude's not very good. Foreman, another guy that might be able to give you a little bit of special teams value. My point is, if Gallup shows that he's not 100% healthy and can't give you anything in special teams, if the Raiders go, well, we already have Devontae, we have Jacoby, we have Brock Bowers, and we have Trey Tucker. Like, those are our top 4 receivers, which, like, those are your top 4 receivers. And then you have Michael Mayer. There's another guy. So Gallup is hoping to be that 6th target. If they want that 6th target to also have some special teams ability, then that's why you decide to move on from a player like Michael Gallup, even though you did just sign him. Let's go to number 2 here, and this is where we're, again, it's surprise cut candidates. I think if any of these players got cut, people would be like, oh, yeah, that's a surprise. I get the idea of the show, Mitch, which I'm glad that you do. The reason why I have Divine Deablo on here is because they drafted Tommy Eichenberg in round 5. And if the Raiders want to roll with Eichenberg, Luke Masterson, you also have to give him his flowers too. He's played pretty well. What if they like Amari Burney? What if they don't want to keep all these extra linebackers? But if the Raiders cut Deablo, you save $3.1 million and you're going to eat $246K. Another way that you could get cut is if Deablo wants an extension. The Raiders don't want to give it to him, and he says, well, then get me out of here. I will admit, you should be able to trade Deablo before you cut him. At least, God, I hope so, right? And there should be a team out there willing to give you something for a player who does have his athletic ability. Yes, he's had a lot of injuries, but again, you're talking about a dude on his final year of his deal, And what if they drafted Eichenberg to be that other main starter? What if he's better than Deablo, right? Like, what if we enter a world here where Eichenberg shows that he can be better than Divine Deablo, and the Raiders look at Divine as going, well, I'd rather go young. I'd rather go with Amari Burney, Eichenberg, Luke Masterson, and I can save $3 million. I can use that $3 million. I can invest that in a position of need. Maybe it's a corner. Maybe it's another tackle. But I know that the least important position to Patrick Graham, to this defense, is the linebacker position. So if I know that I can save a little bit of money and move on from Deablo, it's just somebody to keep in mind. All Raider fans want Divine to work out because every single person knows that this guy is an athletic freak. It's just he has never been able to put it together up here. I hope that this is the year that he figures it out. Let's play a game, though. You got to pick one to keep, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier with the corners, and when I did my 53-man roster projection, I go, if the Raiders decide to only keep 4 linebackers, to me, you're going to move on from one of these names right here. Do you move on from Luke Masterson? Do you move on from Amari Burney? If you could only keep one, are you keeping Masterson? Type LM. Or are you keeping Amari Burney? I want you to type AB. If you want a better true linebacker that helps cover, I would say Luke Masterson is the name that you want. If you want a linebacker that also gives you a little bit more ability to potentially get after the QB and also more special teams value, then that one to me is Amari Burney because he is the better athlete from top to bottom. The last name, and this is the most surprising of the bunch, Thayer Munford Jr. Hear me out. What if Delmar Glaze beats out Thayer Munford? And then Munford's just upset, doesn't love what he's dealing with, and that could be an option to potentially move on. My other question is, does Munford want to play only offensive tackle? I spoke with Munford right before the NFL draft, and I asked him, would you be open to playing offensive guard and offensive tackle? He replied with, I'm playing offensive tackle. Tom Telesco also said that he was open to playing offensive guard, offensive tackle. The fact that the Raiders drafted Delmar Glaze as early as what they did tells me that they're going to put him in a little bit of a competition. I believe in Thayer Munford. I still think that he's a good player. I liked when the Raiders drafted him. We had a high draft grade on him. If you cut him, though, you can save almost $1 million. You're going to eat $49K. What if the Raiders tell Thayer Munford, we want you to play offensive guard, and Munford doesn't love that idea? What if he gets beat out by a Delmar Glaze and gets very unmotivated? He also is not part of this regime. He also was not part of the regime that had the former offensive line coach. Like, I think because you have a different offensive line coach, a different head coach, a different, coach really realistically from top to bottom, and a different OC in Luke Getsy, you could see a lot of things that we think is certain can totally change really, really quickly here. And because Munford is a 7th-round pick with that former regime and could get beat out by Glaze, it's a possibility. That's why I decided to put him up here as a surprise cut candidate. So one more time here are my top 5 surprise cut candidates, and I just want to say that I really think that most of these players do end up making the roster. And the important word in this segment is surprise. But I hope that I was able to paint a good enough picture of what could happen if this guy ends up getting moved on from. And realistically, I wanted to do this show because I made a video right before the NFL draft, 5 surprise players that the Raiders could take at 13. Number 2 on that list was Brock Bowers. So this team, year in and year out, right when you think you got them figured out, they go, not so fast, sweetheart. And then they do something a little bit different. That's what this show is. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you did, tell your friends, subscribe to the Raiders Report. I'm trying to grow this thing. Let's get to 200,000 subs by the start of the season.